Okay, and I think that we are in. It's always a challenge, I tell you, every time. Hi, and welcome to Monday Meets at the Willow this week. Very excited to talk to Shannon Reid. Hi, Shannon.
Hey,
Um,
everybody.
yeah, Shannon is the Court Advocacy Program Coordinator, and we're going to go ahead and talk about what that is, elements of that program, how it evolved, and things of that nature. So first and foremost, for those of you who are just joining us, you can ask questions on here. We're kind of keeping it on a relatively informal basis. We'll try to get to them as we can. I've got my eye on the page, so if you have any questions, just put them in the comments, and we will go for there. It's just an informal chat, probably last around 20 to 30 minutes, and we're going to talk about court advocacy. So first of all, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it, Shannon. Could you kind of give us your title and then tell us a little bit of background about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Shannon Reid, and I have been coordinating the court advocacy program at the Willow Domestic Violence Center since February of 2013. So a good amount of time, and we are a one-staff program, but we have always had a really great team of volunteers that support the program. And then also we work alongside other community-based advocates, especially those who are based in our rural communities in other counties. I'm predominantly based in Douglas County, but provide court advocacy support to all three of the counties that the Willow serves, so Douglas, Franklin, and Jefferson County. And what court advocacy looks like and kind of the overall basis of our program is that we provide informational, emotional, and safety support to any survivor that's experiencing domestic violence, human trafficking, stalking, just really any interpersonal violence in their lives, who have a variety of court cases they might be navigating. So that could be protection order hearings, the process for filing and obtaining protection orders, possibly being called to testify as a witness as a victim or witness in a case against somebody who has harmed them that's being prosecuted by one of our local courts. And then we also provide a lot of support with people who are navigating civil cases such as divorce proceedings, custody issues, and sometimes even their own criminal cases that they may have against them that are both impacted by the trauma they've experienced, if not a direct result of the trauma and violence that they've experienced, or that is certainly provides even further kind of confusion and compounding to trauma. So our role is to support people with understanding the legal proceedings that they're involved in to the best of our ability. Really kind of, sometimes I say that we help translate the legalese for people in certain court paperwork and what judges and attorneys may say to them to help folks understand what that means and what their options are and how to stay safe as possible throughout that.
Okay, great. And so this program, you sort of started and developed this program from scratch, correct?
Not exactly. I would like to think that I've grown the program quite a bit and expanded the scope of what we do. When I came into the position, it had been vacant for several months, and so there was definitely a gap in Willow services of being able to provide really consistent support to people needing court advocacy. And I think that the origins of the program were really mostly rooted in helping people file for and navigate protection order proceedings, which is something we still do quite a lot of. But it became pretty quickly evident to me that there were a lot of nuances to the legal system and a whole host of ways that someone might be engaging with that legal system as a victim, as a defendant in cases. There's civil courts and criminal courts, there's district courts and municipal courts, and it just became clear to me in that first probably 6 months or so of job that there was a lot more to court advocacy than protection orders, and to be able to provide really holistic support to people. We make a point to understand all the legal issues that somebody might be facing and find out where our role is in helping connect those dots and kind of drawing the line between them and making sure that they've got the best support they can get throughout those proceedings.
Okay. Yeah, I was kind of, I wanted to make sure that people were aware sort of the differences between advocacy and legal advice, because I think that is kind of an area where there may be some confusion. So could you
Sure.
maybe talk a little bit about what how advocacy differs from sort of legal advice and help?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think the two get it gets confused or conflated quite a bit. And I'm certainly not an attorney. We do not at this point in time have any attorneys that work for the Willow staff. And so we cannot ethically or legally provide legal advice because we don't have the training to do so. So I'm always very clear with clients that we have and new referrals we get that we are not in a position to advise somebody on what they could or should do. And, that's even more so true because as advocates who work at an empowerment-based agency, our role is to listen to what people ask for from us, what questions and concerns and confusions they have about any particular issue that they're dealing with. And then our role as advocates is to hear them, to support them, and to give them information that is relevant to the issues that they are trying to navigate. So I really believe that empowerment-based advocacy is about giving people information that empowers them to make an informed decision about their safety. And it's us filling a bit of a gap that the system does not always provide in actually helping folks understand either what rights they have as a victim, what charges they may be facing of their own, what the process and outcomes of a protection order proceeding look like. There are just a lot of things that that aren't evident just by the legal language offered by courts and attorneys, and the advocates can help kind of translate some of that information and make it make sense. And then do so through the lens of safety and support always. So always recognizing that the people we serve know their situations 100% more than anybody else could. They are truly the experts in their situations, and we defer to survivors to tell us what they need from us, and we follow their lead, and we give them the information that is relevant to them. And we only advocate to other entities, whether it's their attorney, prosecutors, law enforcement, courts, the jail, any of those professionals, with the explicit consent of the survivors that we work with. So we don't work for or within the system. We serve survivors who are navigating systems, and we only talk about those issues or address those issues with other systems when they give us explicit consent to do so. And ideally we do that together, right? Because my job is to help lift up survivors' voices and make sure that they're being heard and that their concerns being addressed, not to speak for them.
Yeah, certainly one thing that when I came in and did my training on court advocacy that really stuck with me was that for many survivors, court will be the first time that they actually face their abusers since they have left, and that was a really key time to be there to help to provide that support and information. So unlike the kind of crisis in the shelter where the main point of contact is usually a phone call initially to get more information, to get assistance, can you kind of guide us through how court advocacy, how a survivor gets involved with with our court advocacy system and how that kind of plays out and how that works?
Sure. I take pride in the point that I think we get a lot of different connection points for court advocacy. So we certainly get a lot of internal referrals from people who contact the Willow hotline first, whether it's because they just have some basic questions and somebody gave them our number, whether it's because they're in crisis and they call seeking shelter or some immediate kind of intervention support. So we do get a lot of internal referrals that way, but we also get referrals from the court, from different offices in the courts directly, who tell folks they can contact us for support with protection order proceedings, We get referrals from folks who work in the prosecutor's office that may have the first point of contact with a victim after a law enforcement report has been made and charges may be getting filed. We get referrals from law enforcement directly sometimes, especially down in Franklin County, where we have been able to work with them to implement lethality assessments, where law enforcement officers are doing an assessment with victims on the scene of the original domestic violence related or stalking or trafficking related call. They will refer folks to us and make an explicit point of contact between that victim and an advocate for further support. So, and we also get a lot of referrals from attorneys who have worked with us in the past and who may meet a client because either they were retained by them for divorce or custody or protection order case, or maybe they were appointed to them for a criminal case, and if they see red flags or have safety concerns related to domestic violence, then they make direct referrals and are sometimes that connection point, in addition to other community agencies. So I think court advocacy is pretty unique in that we there are a lot of different paths that people get to us and ways in which they get our contact information and reach out for support. And I'm proud of that because I think that it's a diversity of tactics is necessary, and that we have really increased our intake of referrals over the years that I've been here because of the connections that our program's been able to make throughout the community. And then, you know, Will, hearing you talk about one of the things that really stuck with you in the beginning of your time at the Willow being that court is often the time when a survivor is faced with having to be in the same physical courtroom, sometimes testifying against or providing evidence against the person who has harmed them, their abuser or stalker. That's a real unique thing about court advocacy. And so it requires a lot of additional safety planning and kind of nuanced thought about how someone is coming and going from the courthouse on days that they have to appear. What will make them feel both physically safe enough and emotionally and mentally safe enough to go into a courtroom, tell their story, provide whatever required testimony there may be, and how do we best support them with that? And so a lot of safety planning goes into when we get to meet people before they have those court dates and those encounters, how to make somebody feel as safe and supported as possible. And so that's different for every person. Sometimes it's a matter of wanting to know what the layout of the courthouse is, like, because they've never been there before. So we might meet up before court, days before court, just to walk through the courthouse and locate which courtroom they'll be in, where the restroom is, a space where we can go talk and have privacy if they're feeling overwhelmed or experiencing anything like an anxiety or panic attack. How do we plan for that and know how to support them that day? And it might look like giving them rides to court or helping them figure out somebody safe who could bring them to and from court. So it is a pretty unique way of doing advocacy because much of the other advocates in the Willow are not necessarily navigating the space of survivors having to be faced with their abusers again, specifically after having either made a report to police, filed for a protection order, requested that, you know, agreed to testify against them. Those are pretty bold and brave things and very risky things that come with their own safety concerns.
Yeah, so there's not only the process of ensuring the survivor's safety, but also you have the core processes that you're dealing with on top of that, and all the information that to be, you know, kind of given out about that as well. Just if you're just joining us, we're talking about court advocacy with Shannon Reid. If anybody has any questions, feel free to throw them in the comments. We would be happy to answer any other questions that you have. I did want to shift focus a little bit because at the beginning of the conversation, we were talking a little bit about court orders and protection orders. And I think that is still an integral part of what the advocacy program does. Can you kind of talk a little bit about those, and again, how the two types differ, and what services we provide surrounding those?
Sure. Yeah, it's kind of much like a lot of court processes, a little bit convoluted, and but basically, so the state of Kansas, well, let me say all states have some version of what is called a civil protection order, or some states call them restraining orders. There's a variety of names for them, but they are a civil court proceeding, which means that, for example, if I felt that I needed a protection order put in place, I petition the court through a written packet of information, and I petition the court to ask for them to issue immediate temporary orders of protection on my behalf. And in Kansas, we have two different types. They basically have the same outcomes, but they're kind of designed for different people's experiences of violence. And so there's a protection from abuse order, and then what most folks still call a protection from stalking order, but the laws have changed over the past few years, so that now it's a protection from stalking, sexual assault, and or human trafficking order. So it really encompasses a few different types of victimization. And what the process really looks like for that is that let's just use me as an example. If I felt that I needed a protection order from the court, I would file paperwork, and if I had experienced physical violence or threats of physical violence on at least one occasion or more. As we know, in domestic violence and trafficking and stalking, it's a patterned behavior. So most people have experienced it more than once, but the state law requires that there be one explicit incident of physical violence or threat of physical violence to qualify for a PFA, is what we call them, a protection from abuse. The other qualifying factor of that is that it has to be, I can only file it against somebody that I have been in relationship to. So either someone I've been in a dating relationship with, have a child in common with, or who I have resided with. And so that means that it could be another adult family member that I live with, or a roommate that I am not intimately involved with, but that maybe I have experienced some type of violence or exploitation from. So the protection from abuse order has those kind of qualifying factors. And then on the other hand, a protection from stalking, sexual assault, or human trafficking order, you can file it against anybody, regardless of whether or not you have been in some type of previous relationship or shared a residence together, because anybody could have stalked, assaulted, or trafficked me, for example. So for the qualifications of that, it requires there be at least 2 or more incidents of stalking behavior that exhibits a pattern, or one particular incident of sexual assault or trafficking. And so we help people discern kind of which order fits their situation best, and what laws kind of match up with that. And then we can assist folks with filling out that paperwork. You submit it to the county clerk's office, and a judge has to review the order the same day that it was submitted, because they are emergency proceedings. And then that judge will determine whether or not to grant temporary orders, or to dismiss the request. And if they grant temporary orders, a hearing date will get set. And in Kansas, the law says that a hearing is supposed to take place within 21 days. And so a hearing date will be set within a couple weeks' time. And at that point, and then the sheriff's office will be charged with going to locate the defendant that I've filed an order against and have them personally served. And in the state of Kansas, that personal service piece is pretty important, because technically a protection order is not in full force and effect until the individual whom I filed against has actually been served with the papers in person. And so that is a particular safety issue that we navigate with folks a lot, because sometimes they don't know where, for example, if their abuser has left the home, they've successfully left the home, but they don't know where they are. They may not be easy to locate. They could be intentionally evading law enforcement. And so sometimes that piece of paper, although it may be ordered by the court, does not serve immediate safety because it's invalid. It's not valid or enforceable until it's been served. And then assuming somebody gets served, then at that first court date, a couple of things could happen. And that could be either that, well, the court is going to ask me as the petitioner, for example, if I wish to keep the orders in place and ask for a final order. And the word final is kind of a misnomer because really if you get a final order, that's for 1 year with the opportunity to extend it. And so at that first court date, the defendant whom I filed against, that would be their first opportunity to come to court and contest the order, contest the allegations. And if they contest it, which is their right, then a new hearing date will get set and there will be a trial with evidence and testimony so that the judge can make a decision from there. The other outcome is that the defendant does not show up, but if they have been served, then they were given notice that if they fail to show up at that court date, that an order could be placed against them. And so then we oftentimes are helping folks just get to that first court date and tell the judge that they wish to keep it in place, and then they can get a default order without having to provide any further testimony or evidence. And so those are the kind of basic outcomes, and we do help a lot of people fill out the order initially, and so are helping them connect to Kansas Legal Services or other attorneys before court, ideally, if they're interested in legal representation. We're safety planning with them around what coming to court looks like and how we can best support them that day at the courthouse. But there are also a lot of people who file protection orders on their own, who either know the process, look it up and figure it out on their own, and either decide not to call us or just don't know about us yet. And we make sure that we have advocates available at all of those hearings throughout our service area to provide outreach on the spot. And so what that looks like in Douglas County, which is where I practice that most regularly, is in Douglas County every Friday afternoon is protection order docket, and that means that it's multiple cases set at the same time, and it's kind of treated like a first appearance for everybody or a status hearing. And what we do as advocates is we check people into the courtroom. We have plaintiffs sit on one side and defendants sit on the other side. We provide outreach to the people that we have not yet met and that may not know about our services, and just offer on-the-spot support, whether that's somebody to sit with them in court and just process with them and help them feel emotionally supported, whether that's filling out an application for Kansas Legal Services, etc.
Okay, great. You had mentioned that you're the one staff member, and then the rest of the corps is a group of volunteers. If somebody did want to get involved or did want to volunteer for a court advocacy volunteer position, how would they do that? Yeah,
thanks for asking. We rely a lot on volunteers, and I've been lucky to have a really good group over the years, and a core group of folks who show up and provide that docket outreach a lot. So correct me if I'm wrong, Will, but I believe that our website does have a volunteer interest form where people can submit their request to volunteer. And I will admit that I don't know if there's anything on that original contact form that specifies whether or not someone's interested in being a shelter advocate or a court advocate, but certainly in writing, people could express that they're interested in court advocacy in particular. And then those interest forms would be forwarded on to me, and then we would work to set up interviews and have further conversation about what volunteering for the court advocacy program looks like and what volunteering for the Willow at large looks like. And if it's a good fit, then we go forward with just scheduling. We have pretty intensive direct service training, because there's a lot to know and learn about domestic violence and trafficking. And then and really get a foundation of that information and what being an empowerment-based advocate looks like. And then after that initial kind of foundational training that all volunteer advocates go through, anybody who's interested in court advocacy would just start doing like shadowing shifts with myself and other long-term volunteers to get a hang for what court proceedings look like, how we do outreach in person at those weekly dockets, how we field calls that we get throughout the week. And so folks would just shadow us, and we don't have a real prescribed amount of time that takes, because I think that everybody is different, and experiential learning is the best way to, it's how I learned this job, was just the experience of doing it and watching other advocates and watching other attorneys also and their knowledge of courts. And once a volunteer is feeling comfortable and confident with how those things go, then they may take on some solo shifts during the week where they're answering the phone for half a day and fielding referral calls, helping people fill out those protection orders, and or showing up at those dockets to provide outreach.
Great. Okay. Well, just a couple more questions before we go here. I've been kind of looking at everybody's position within the agency and focusing kind of on their programs and what they do. But at the end, I do like to just generally ask everyone, what programs or changes would you like to see the Willow make going forward? I think it's kind of fascinating to see not only what people reflect upon their own programs, but what they'd like to see us do in the future.
Sure. I think my answer to that, and my big dream that I hope will come true someday, is that we have a staff attorney, because it is just a fact that finding legal representation for clients who are navigating civil cases, especially such as protection orders, divorces, and custody issues, which we know the nature of those things can go on for years and years and years. And we also know that when separation occurs from an abusive former partner or co-parent that you have to continue co-parenting with, that a tactic of further abuse and control can be for the abusive person to always be bringing somebody back into court and making allegations, filing different motions. And so it's a real gap in services that we have. Kansas Legal Services is an incredible partner, and they're really our go-to place for civil legal representation for clients, but they cannot represent every single client, either due to conflicts of interest that sometimes come up or just their own limited resources. So to have a staff attorney who is well versed in domestic violence and the dynamics of it and how that shows up in civil court cases especially would be a dream come true for me. It is the thing that we are always kind of shuffling to find ways to fill in that gap when Kansas Legal Services can't be of assistance. So if there are any current law students and or current attorneys watching right now who are looking for something and you want to talk more about finding some grant funding to get you as a staff attorney, I would love to talk about it.
Awesome. One last question. I like to give everybody a chance to kind of shout out anything that they're doing that's not necessarily Willow related. So is there anything you wanted to kind of, any programs or ideas or things that you've got going on right now? I mean, you're running for a county commission, so we probably should address that a little bit. So yeah, would you like to, any events coming up or talks that you'd like to kind of promote?
Sure, I appreciate that. Yes, I am running for county commissioner in District 2, which is the eastern half of the county, basically North Lawrence and East Lawrence, Eudora, Baldwin, and all the rural districts in between that. You know, that's really all I'll say about that. If you can look up my name, if you want to follow my campaign information online, please feel free to. But I decided to run because I think that I have a lot of advocacy skills from my time at the Willow and other social service agencies before the Willow to contribute to the conversation about how our county leads with its budget and its policies on how to really support people's safety and how to support justice for people and how to really change systems that aren't working for the most vulnerable people. And this job has taught me a lot about what barriers exist in the community for people in a variety of ways. And so I'm interested in bringing that experience. So it's a direct step up from the advocacy that I do at the Willow, and I really want to apply that experience to the whole county. So I've been doing that all summer. That's pretty much my other job right now, is campaigning for that. And otherwise, I spend a lot of time with my partner Bobby and our pets, and we've got 2 dogs and a cat. We mostly just been staying inside because, you know, Kansas summer heat is a real thing.
Yeah, for sure.
But otherwise, we generally spend a lot of time outside just doing kind of DIY projects and planting pollinator gardens. And today's exciting news is that a bunch of our black-eyed Susans bloomed over the weekend. And
Nice.
we have a whole bunch of new cone flowers that are popping open. So that's fun. And bees buzzing everywhere.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. Really do appreciate it. If anybody needs more information on court advocacy services, Shannon, I'm sure would be happy to answer any questions. Do you mind if I throw out your email address?
Oh, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, all right. It's sreid, SREID at willowdvcenter.org. I'll put that too down below on the comments. And if you need to get in touch with us immediately, 785-843-3333 is the 24-hour hotline. So thank you so much, Shannon. Really appreciate your time, and really appreciate all the hard work and passion you give to the court advocacy.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.